Hello.
Hello. Sorry, that was the bell. Yeah, thanks. All right, I guess I'll sit in the front. Come on. No one wants to take the middle seat.
Thank you.
Jeez.
I feel more love now. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to stay here the whole time. We'll make someone else come up sit it here. But this is my sixth period, right? So different class. But they also had some of the same results when we did a little survey yesterday. Carbon tax was one of the top one. Although now that I'm thinking about it, that's probably not the most interesting topics to discuss. But then the service animals and then the automatic voter registration for this class was a little bit higher. The interest was, at least. But do you want to start out kind of who you are, and then we can go into any of those three topics?
Yes, I think that was a better way to get started too, so folks know why I am not Charlie Brown. You may remember meeting him last time, and my name is Heidi K. Walter, and I'm now a lobbyist working with Charlie Brown. I'm an attorney also, and so we're coming at this with a perspective of getting information to the people both ways. That's one of the things that I was going to add to what he said to the class last week, or last time that you guys had a chance to talk with him, was our job is to get information to people. As he mentioned, there's just not a way for a member of the House or Senate to read and know all the background and all the, for example, the carbon tax bill, all the methods for which you collect payments and that sort of thing on the different places the taxes happen, or what exactly a carbon emission would look like, what that really does to the environment, that sort of thing. So our job as lobbyists is to get the information to the people going both ways, that our clients sometimes don't have a full understanding of the legislative process, or where bills can get caught up, where arguments between different members can throw off your well-being of your bill, that sort of thing. Getting information to both sides is what we do. So that's, and I just believe good government comes from good information. Sometimes really well-intentioned plans come up, but they're not informed. And so you get bad policy, bad legislation. Something that when I was doing a little bit of this before going to law school. When I went to law school and realized the impact of, a may, shall, or should in a bill, what that means to it being overturned by the courts is huge. And I didn't have a good understanding of that until I went off to law school. So those are pieces that come together. That's what we do, is we bring information. So there's me, and I understand this class is doing current government, current world affairs. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how you made your choice individually, why you chose the issues that you did? Anyone?
I put the three on the board there.
Personally, I chose the carbon tax because I think environmental change is a huge issue right now. I don't know about anybody else, but what you guys have? Anybody at all? Like one person.
I'm so glad you're saying it, and I don't have to. Thank you. Well, I'll just say it is a really big deal, and that was one of the things I also mentioned to the other class, is that it's got a lot of pieces to it, a lot of people who are really engaged. It's been more controversial than you might expect, because of course everybody loves the idea of making sure that we preserve our environment for future generations. Everybody's on board for that. How you do it, whether this would do it, that's created a lot of people with questions, and so it's a good bill to follow in that regard. One of the things that happened was on Monday there was a request for comments to be received by Monday of this week, and usually 2 or 3 pages come in. Different advocacy groups will send in a letter, whatever. The stack of papers that came in was like this, for proposed changes and recommendations, and they're going to have to try to find some ways to incorporate that, and to either keep people happy, or to make sure that good science is used in making this happen right, making sure that the worst polluters are the ones that are feeling the impact of this, that somebody who has or hasn't been involved in long-term pollution, how we're going to do that going forward, and how we make it usable going forward. So those are going to be really interesting things, and it might make it an interesting bill to follow. But as Mr. Vanderpool was saying earlier, it's also some really technical details that are going into this bill, and that might make it a little less fun to track of like, okay, we moved our carbon emission from $2 per metric ton of carbon dioxide to $30 a ton of carbon dioxide. What does that mean, and what does that look like in taxes statewide? It's not nearly as fun as checking out what's happening with service animals, where you're worrying about service peacocks and whether or not an emotional support peacock on the United Airlines flight really belongs there, and what disruptions does he or she cause. Who voted on the issue for service animals?
Anybody?
Ouch.
No.
One of you did, because it was
We got one. We got
One over here.
one.
It was between both classes, so maybe that one isn't your guys'. What one are you guys interested in then? Voter registration?
And so tell me what you think about the idea. Do you mind sharing with the class and me what you think about the idea of vote being automatically registered to vote?
Me?
Yeah.
Anybody? Oh, sweet.
I think I didn't get a lot of information on it because we just had a summary of it. So I'd like to know more, but I feel like it could go both ways.
And that's another fun thing about this is all the easy answers are taken. If everybody agrees on something and it's all, then it's not coming before the legislature. It's not coming up because, you know, we all agree that kicking a dog for no reason isn't a good idea. So while there's legislation and laws that prohibit that, that's done and that's easy. When it comes to automatically registering people to vote, there's good arguments on both sides. And so that might be an interesting bill to follow because of that. Sorry, that one isn't one that I checked the status on, but there is, you know, making it really easy for people to register versus making it automatic for someone to be registered and then for them to have to take active steps to remove themselves from voter rolls. There are some reasons people choose not to register to vote. I personally can't imagine what they are, but and so that's another good issue, and that also raises the point of why somebody would or wouldn't want there to be automatic voter registration. Another thing that came up in the committee on that one was a question of how much is it going to cost the agencies to really implement this. There was talk of multiple agencies having to do it, and then somebody said, well, maybe we just keep it with Department of Licensing, who's started the motor voter registrations when you register for your driver's license. So those are things. Did anybody have any other votes, or were you torn on other issues? I'm looking around my screen here.
Personally, I did not choose automatic voter registration because I feel like if somebody is interested in voting, they're going to make sure that they're eligible to vote and that they're registered to vote. So I felt like it was kind of counterintuitive in a way, because if you want to vote, you're going to vote.
And who in the room, and I'm sorry, I can only see the one side of the room, but have any of you done actions to reach out to your legislators on issues that you care about?
No. I was going to vote in this election cycle, but I turned 18 the 14th, which is like the end. Yeah. Sucks.
I'll point out, he's not in here, but another student, Casey, in this class, he sent out some emails earlier in the year having to do with net neutrality. Both our senators and Denny Heck, our representative in our district here, and he got responses and replies from all three, which was pretty cool. The principal thought those were pretty awesome as well. But other than that, I never did it as a set assignment or anything. But one of the things I was actually thinking about is just kind of like a question. If everybody is automatically registered to vote, how do you guys feel about people voting that maybe aren't informed on issues? If everybody's automatically registered, I'm saying for you guys, right? Because like if everybody's automatically registered, then that means, but we already kind of understand that not everybody's going to be automatically informed and know everything about every issue. right? So, I mean, how do you guys feel about those people actually voting yes or no, or for or against it?
I mean, I definitely want to agree with their opinion, but I believe they should have the right to have it. Yeah, they should vote how they're going to vote, but I mean, I'm not going to like condone how somebody views something if I don't agree with it.
And here's another thing that we brought up in the last one is it's not always super easy to get information about measures that, you know, the voter's guide is written by, the statements are each written by the person who feels the strongest or has found a way to put their name on the pros and the cons. But even is that always all the information that you need to make good decisions? And one of the places that we looked at in the last class, and something that I think you'll find really helpful if you're tracking the bill, is the ledge.wa.gov website. You can learn a lot about the bills that are being proposed, find out what's going on with them, and find out what some of the other opinions are. And if you could pull up the 6203, our magic TVW team here is going to make it so you can take a look at the ledge.wa.gov site. And I've always been really impressed. This is where I turn to when I'm looking up a bill. And I think we're going to go back to the front page. And you'll see there just on the left corner, if you want to find out information. You've heard the bill number. If you go over to bill information on it. Sorry. Go over to bill information. We're looking at 6203, for example. And you scroll down, and the first thing that you see is the links to the bill itself. And then as you go down, you can read the bill, see the status of it, where it is in committee, and what else needs to happen with it. So you can see here, this one was introduced in the Senate, went into the committee. It hasn't come onto the floor calendar. Right now, that 6 inches of comments that are going back and forth are being talked about among those stakeholders. And so then some of that will result in some amendments, that sort of thing, then go to the floor calendar. But you can follow that there. The bill history talks about what's happened since it was introduced in committees, that sort of thing. And then you go down a little further. And my favorite section right now on the bottom right there, the bill reports, that has a short version of the bill. Not short version, a staff summary of the bill and the things that have happened so far. So you get this little window of a very complex issue right there is all just in a short window of summary of what's gone on. And then a little further down, some of the pros and cons that people have testified to, the background, who thought of it, who's the staff member that knows more about it if you need to get details. But legislative staff has pulled together a lot of the information and done their best to make it as easily accessible as possible. So that's something great. And then you can read the full text of the bill and say, well, I agree with this, I don't agree with that. So that's something. Has anyone, and then when you're doing that, that also gives you more information on ideas of what you might say to your legislators about what you think is working or isn't working about that. You can look at what others have said too. So what other questions do you have about these bills? I feel like I'm dominating the conversation when I want to hear from you, and I want you guys to feel engaged too.
So do you have
y'all?
So do you have like a general overview of how like the carbon tax works like right now and how the bill would change that?
I don't have an overview of that right now. There isn't a carbon tax in place this way. So no. And also the bill is being changed on a really regular basis. So it's hard to say what's going to even come out of the meeting this afternoon with the stakeholders. My short answer is I don't know.
Yeah, the one I read it was like just straight up based off of pollution. Like it was fossil fuel pollution. And then I remember reading something about like a tax credit for switching away from fossil fuels. Is that something that was talked about at some point?
Let me take a look here real quick. The one thing, the Clean Energy Investment Program is something that allows utility companies to claim credits when they do make those investments in reductions of the fossil fuels or carbon emissions. So that's probably the provision you're talking about. Is that sound like something that makes sense to you guys? Do you think that they should get credits, or should they just be doing it without incentives?
Yeah,
They should, but how do the credits work exactly?
It's like they have to pay less taxes theoretically.
So you save money.
So they save money in taxes, and theoretically over the long haul, by making that switch over many years, they would pay less taxes. I guess that's the idea.
Yeah, it's pretty fair.
They talk about the carrot and the stick approach of, offering something that they want to encourage them to do the right thing. So giving them a carrot, or, hitting them over the head with the stick if they're not doing what you want them to do. And that's the question of a lot of legislation. How do we get companies to do the right thing? Another way of looking at it, or another question that comes up, is how much of this do you encourage them to do voluntarily and encourage them to just be transparent so consumers see what's going on so they can make decisions, or do you require it and have fines and fees if they're not doing it right? So this isn't going to be finished this year. Not to say that that this bill won't happen this year. I mean to say there's going to be tweaks and modifications to it for years to come. So, 10 years down the road, you guys can be saying to friends and family, I remember 10 years ago when this bill was first happening and it looked a lot different, or, worked well, didn't work well, and you'll be able to see that. Another thing that came up with this bill in particular is the idea of including an initiative in the mix, that there's some folks, both the environmental communities and tribal communities, are worried that the proposal that's going to come out of the legislature won't do enough to protect the environment. And so they're thinking about doing a bill through the initiative process that would be, might have some more provisions, in their opinion, that would hopefully help more. So that then would be something you guys could track. It looks like they're probably going to be introducing that later this month. So we'll see what happens. That will change the conversation in the legislature if that happens. Yep. I feel like I'm talking, and I'm curious. I mean, what other thoughts do you have on these issues?
Yeah, we don't have to talk about carbon tax. We don't want to. Either one, whatever you want. Animals. Christine, what are you curious about the service animal bill?
How would they identify if it was a false license?
If it was a
False license, a fake one, rather than an actual official one, to be fined the $500?
right, I'm not sure what they would use for that. I don't know how they would determine that. I mean, if the licenses are registered, then they would have their registration database. But I'm not sure that requires the registration of those licenses. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's the question brought up, the service. Oh, sorry. There's questions brought up with the service animals where someone was mentioning how is it currently illegal to ask someone that brings a service animal if they're actually a service animal or not? Right? Did someone ask that? I feel like someone did. I don't know, maybe it was the other class. But we were wondering how that might be fixed, or how would that work? If you have a peacock or a snake that you are claiming is a service animal, what does, or even just a drooly chihuahua, right? That just is really messy and what are the provisions to do that? Yeah, it said fine. There was a $500 fine, but are there any methods in place yet, or?
Well, right now, and the questions that our retailers are asking is, is this a service animal, and what service does he or she provide for you? Or, how is this animal helping you? And beyond that, I believe the certification and that sort of thing is not required. And so I don't know how they're going to change that to make the determination of whether or not this is what you would consider a service animal. Washington State has some provisions, and maybe you know more about that. There's miniature horses and dogs right now that are considered acceptable, that are considered to be service animals. But for example, there hasn't been a provision in Washington law for comfort snakes. We have some comfort snakes that are being brought into stores in Eastern Washington that there aren't provisions for. And so because we know there aren't provisions, we know that that isn't something. Yeah, exactly. I see in the front row someone with their snake actually wearing it around his neck and going in and scaring customers and being really disruptive. That when he's been being asked to leave, arguing and fighting with the store staff about being asked to leave with his comfort snake, and similar comfort spider. I don't know how many of you would like to be walking along in a store next to someone in their comfort spider. Taps, and it's really hard. So I don't know about the provisions.
Yeah. No. Now there's a debate over whether tarantulas can kill you.
Yeah, that brought up a whole nother topic. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the questions that we would have, is kind of like how would this work in society if they break it, or because we do have a student at school who has Robert, who has a dog, I believe, right? Robert.
Yes, two, right?
Two different dogs that kind of go back and forth. And is it more for? I'm assuming it's seizures. I've never had him in class though. Is it? You think so? So yeah, it's to prevent seizures or those kinds of things.
I think it's Asperger's.
Asperger's, yeah, it's kind of calm him down a little bit. So.
And that's another thing in the testimony. If you guys want to watch the testimony on service animals, there was a conversation about a couple of the folks that testified were talking about their service animals and how other animals were disrupting because service animals do go through some really extensive training. For example, you're not going to be able to identify a seizure without lots of training, and they're also in their behavior and things like that. She was saying you got to be really disruptive when other dogs who weren't trained would come up and start sniffing or barking at her dog. And it's really interesting to think about those additional disruptions that cause. And it's fun to watch a testimony, see what people have to say to their legislators in person, and maybe prepare you for when you're ready to give testimony on something you care about to the legislature.
All right, so I mean, thinking about next time, which will be a couple weeks away, I can definitely do something with leg.wa.gov. We can look at one of these bills. Is there anything else that we can do to kind of prepare for next time?
The other thing is, as you're looking those up, think about how you would feel about these bills and some things that you might want to say to your legislators about either how to make it better or whether you believe they should support it or not. Also on that leg.wa.gov website, you can look up who your legislators are. I don't know if there's any of you outside the boundaries that are all the same, but you can take a look at that, see who your legislators are, and find out how to get a hold of them by email, letter, or phone call. So that could be something else you could do to prepare, and then we can talk about ways to be effective with reaching out to your legislators. So they know how they're, because at the end of the day, the thing that they want to do is represent their constituents, and you're their constituents, even if you're not yet ready to vote, that you are their constituents. You're the people who they want to hear from, so they know how they can be voting to represent their district.
All right.
So
Cool.
those would be my.
Thank you.
Any other last comments?
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me in today, and I hope you guys have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.